Hello and welcome to episode 122. Every organization believes in sales, which is the lifeblood. But customer retention is strangely not accorded the importance it should be given, even after studies have proven that retention is the foundation for growth. Today, we have someone skilled at this lesser known art, which is equally, if not more important. And it'll benefit those who are seeking a career which has several long term benefits. Rashmi Birla brings over 18 years of distinguished experience in client service and stakeholder management across leading global organizations. She has worked with JP Morgan and MSCI and built expertise in servicing a diverse client base across products, geographies, and industries. She set up the ESG Client Service desk from the ground up, and her journey offers valuable lessons in how do you build customer service functions or support functions, and it's not just about setting up a call center. My name is Venugopal. I head an organization called Ideascape. We are into branding, services, and design. And each week, I talk to a person about an interesting career. And today, we'll get Rashmi to speak about what it takes to retain customers, because that is actually just as important. So, Rashmi, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Venu. The pleasure is entirely mine.
Okay, when you started off, this is not something that people they sort of gravitate towards it, right? So, what were your growing up years like, and what were the kind of things you were interested in early on?
So earlier on, I was like to start with, I was very interested in getting into civil services because that was my dad's dream. But I very quickly understood that that was not my forte. I sort of liked interacting with people. I liked building those connections and seeing how different it is in terms of connection with one person to another. Like what works for one doesn't work for another. So how do you really re-engineer your relationship parameters for every person? So that's something that I enjoyed a lot, and a lot of observations came out of that. And then I also was very keen to live an independent life, so I moved to hostel, where again we were faced with a very cosmopolitan crowd, moving from a small city to a crowd like the hostel crowd in Pune. It was very different, and then immediately I realized that I need to up my game. I need to really understand the renewed ecosystem, and then make myself feel belong there, right? Like make myself like I belong there, right? So these are dynamics that I've observed over time as in my growing up years. And as education, I did my post graduation in economics, and then as life would have it, moved on to my first job, which was into client service and servicing clients pan India. Gave me an opportunity to travel India per se and meet
You
people.
remember anything from that first interview, Rashmi?
I remember this that okay, this was a job for a company which was looking for a proper client service executive. Like that was, I remember the designation, and they had a team of salespeople who would come every weekend to interview people. They had done around 16 to 17 interviews. They hadn't liked anyone, and then I went for the interview, and all I did was just speak, my experiences and be very authentic, right? And I remember my boss telling us later that, when Rashmi walked into the room, she was completely like all over the place because she traveled from Pune to Mumbai, and I was, not the best professional looking person to be interviewed. So somebody could be judgmental about that. But then again, I think the conversation was something that was of merit, basically, which is why one interview got me into the company and into my career trajectory in Mumbai.
Okay. So, what did you do early on? What were the first few months of the job like?
Oh yes, that is something, because it was first my a step into the professional world. Okay, and of all the places I've been, I feel Mumbai is the most professional. I mean, with due respect to all other places. Um, the first thing when I entered the office and I met my manager, my boss, And I called him sir, and the first thing he told me is, we don't call sir and madam. You say, my name is Andrew, you need to call me Andrew. And so that was something that was very unusual, but I liked the whole thing. I liked this thing. Now what happened was, my job was to connect with customers. My job was to build relationships and make sure, because these are all subscription based services, so if the customer is not happy for an entire year after the sales is made, then the tricky part is to actually have him renew the subscription.
Renew.
So
Yeah.
my job was to ensure that proper, timely and accurate service is being delivered. And being very new, I remember and part of the job was to deliver trainings on using the service. It was an information aggregation portal, and I had to go and train the users on how to use or navigate the service, so to say. And I had given a lot of demos. That was the training part of it. And I remember I blacked out on one of them, saying blank, completely blank. I did not know how to conduct myself, and I really thought that I'm not really part of this or not meant for this. But then my manager was kind enough to make me understand, just go through the structure of the entire training that is appealing and keeps the user engaged. I said, okay, I tried that approach. The first training that I did was for a banker. I just picked up my bag and went for the meeting, and just went through the process. And then I realized that the more you start going and meeting people and actually doing the job, like being on the job, is basically where you learn the most, because they will ask you questions which will help you reflect on your answers, and they will generate questions in your own mind which will make you more adept with the entire process, the product and the concepts. So I remember my first training was, I was jittery, but I tried not to show that, and I chose that I will do it one person on his desk. So it just worked out
Mm.
well for me. But I also obviously made mistakes. One huge mistake that I made was, there was a client who was not really using our service, and they were on the verge of their subscription was coming near. And I was, that was one of my assigned clients. So I ended up writing an email to them highlighting that they were not using the service and how we could help them. So that
Okay.
brought up the point that they realize that they're not using the service, so they will not pay for it, you know. And
Okay.
yeah, it just,
So give me an instance where you perceived that there was a problem and you turned things around.
oh, there are quite a few, but I can tell you one major one where, in JP Morgan, because we were doing a lot of, client facing support and real time support, because when you're working with a financial organization, every transaction that cannot be resolved will result in a cost element for the bank, because there will be interest involved. Even if the money stays for a night, there'll be interest involved. So there was an instance where, my team suddenly highlighted that the client was supposed to receive some amount of money, but because they were not, they did not have the forms in place for tax deduction, there would be a loss that the client would incur, because these forms are not in place. And because we're dealing with institutional clients, the amount in question is large. So then, basically we got together, we worked through the night to ensure with, and luckily the client was in the US, so all the regulations and everything was open, and there was business as usual there. So we were able to really work our way through the regulatory bodies to get the form in place, to get the signatures just in time for the money to hit the account, and then they getting the tax benefit out of it. So that's, I think, and we highlighted it, we made very sure that we glamorize the entire service aspect of this one, because that's a very important element, right? You've
That's
got to,
fair.
yeah.
You
So,
actually did help.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it
So
was a
it
tangible
was
benefit. Yeah.
true. But I think somewhere down the line, you're telling me that you understood how to navigate this almost by instinct to begin with, and then you kind of built on it.
Yes.
Is that
And
a way
yeah,
of understanding how you realized what your skills were?
actually, no, because I did not realize those were my skills. It was just, I was doing it. I was as part of my own you know lifestyle, or the way I thought about things, I was just progressing with it. And there was some snippets or thoughts that came in my mind, like, look, this person, the perspectives that he has are very different. So I want to use this person for gaining some different perspectives in life. This person is just basically a lot of wisdom, so I will only interact with him this way. And so understanding that was there. But by the virtue of getting into a client service profile and making it like serious business, right? That is when it occurred to me that even when you have to be very, very professional, there is a human angle that you need to add to your job, especially when you're doing client retention, when you're doing relationship management, when you're doing key account management. Like, these are different connotations of the same profile, but in different industries it's called a different term or a different designation. Essentially, what we're doing is just trying to add that human angle, the empathy, the overall experience. And what actually helps is, and it's not only necessary for someone who's client facing, but each of us have had an interaction with some company on a personal level. And that experience matters a lot. And that, if you've had a good experience, for example, a lot of people, I think Tata Sky, when it was launched, it had exemplary client service. You call and it gets done, and immediately you make the payment, the account gets activated, you have a problem. So it was something that stands out, and you live with that experience. And then when you're doing your job and you are facing off with the client, you want to do a similar experience. You want to leave them with a similar experience. So I was just taking examples from real life situations, either talking to, even with your family, when somebody's listening to you and doing what you feel, and making you feel special. It's some sort of a relationship building attitude that comes into play. So I was just learning from different human traits, from situations that we were in, from sometimes there are escalations that you receive from the clients. And being in that client facing role, you are the person who is going to be on the line of fire. And how do you manage that? First, because your senior management is breathing down your neck, then there's an operations team or the research team, whichever team you're interacting with, they are taking their own time to really deliver what needs to be done. And then there's a client that you got to be keeping informed and keeping him pacified that we're doing our best, although we know the reality and we know that this is going to take time. How do you manage that? So and every day, I mean, I'd like to highlight this, that every day in the role of a person who is doing client retention, who's doing client service, key account management, is different. It's so different. You cannot come into the office and say, today this is my day, I'm going to do this. It does not work that way.
That's
Initially it will, but
determined
no.
by how your clients are, what your clients are facing. But tell me
Yes.
this, Rashmi, why is it that sales has this massive, build up, and everyone believes that sales is so important,
Yeah.
but customer retention is not given the attention, or it doesn't have the same aura that sales has. So
That is. Yeah.
uh, come at it from two angles. One is that how does the organization look at paying people in customer support, and typically what do salaries start at, and what are the kind of career paths,
Hmm.
and how is it that you can drive home that advantage to senior management and ensure that you have a great career.
Absolutely. I think that is the crux. I think that'll form the crux of our entire discussion. And you're very aptly, pointing out that there is a very there is a difference in perceiving really what the role of a service team is, a customer service team is, versus the sales. But if you look at it in essence, and there is, I'll also point out certain differences on how different companies approach a service function versus a sales function, and what really then is an impact. Because from my experience, I know that the multinational corporations or the international organizations that we've worked with, the MNC, so to say, they have a different approach to services. They view that as in conjunction with this sales function. Whereas in the Indian context, there is a little bit of a bias, I would say. And let me just talk about the bias and finish it, then I'll come to the best practices thing. So to my mind, I think we've grown up in an era where there was a lot of the outsourcing era that started, where a lot of call centers came up. And the typical term for all these call centers to get a job was doing customer service, right? And everybody knew that, you're fresh out of college, you want to earn some money, you get into a call center. So slowly, I think the psyche, or say the norm or industry norm for saying you do client support or you do customer service, is basically, oh, are you working for a call center? And then, you immediately link working for a call center is equal to this much pay, is equal to this much career growth, and is equal to limited opportunities. I mean, very honestly. So that's become, because for me also, when I used to tell people that I'm doing client service, for example, the first question I was faced with, oh, you're working for a call center. And then I had to, sometimes I would explain, sometimes I would be like, let's not get there. Anyway, so that bias is because of the industry outsourcing norms coming in, and, the knowledge centers coming up, so to say, and it being treated as a cost center largely, because client service or customer support is just not picking up the phone and facing off with the client. It has a lot of different functions underlying. It could be client onboarding, it could be processing of client instructions, or any kind of transactions which will impact the customer directly. It could be relationship building at a more advanced level, and it could be just supporting the client service team as well, technically. That's the IT part of client support, right? So it is actually an organization of its own, if you ask me, because there are different aspects, as I said. Now, in companies that are more geared towards customer retention, because any transaction, any company is, very very geared towards revenue, and there are two aspects of revenue. One is revenue generation, that's largely what the sales team does, and there is revenue retention, because you want to, acquire a customer, and very very importantly, make sure that the services that you deliver to them are very timely and accurate, so that they decide to stay on and add to the revenue of the company year on year. And that's why the sales process may take like 3 months, 4 months, depending on what you're selling. But the support function, but the service function takes way longer. It's like a lifelong thing, as long as the customer is with you, and the customer will be with you as long as you're able to service their expectations according to what they require from the service. So, coming back, this is what happens between, say, working in different organizations, and you taking a look at how that company really perceives the support function as. Now, there are some companies I've seen where there is the segregation. Like I said, there will be an onboarding team. So there will be a pre-sales team, there'll be a sales team, then there is a customer onboarding team, which only specializes in the documentation part, the login creations, and things like that. And then there will be an orientation session, which the client will know what they're expecting out of the service, etc. And then, so what I'm trying to say is, one is you have just a dedicated team that does everything, and that's not bad at all. And then there is an organization which has different specialized functions within the client service organization, that works for very very high ticket clients, for, when you're dealing with those high end sort of products. Now, in terms of career trajectory and in terms of salary expectations, I would say, like I started with the customer executive, so they would, draw anywhere between, say, 4 to 8 lakhs a year, kind of a package. And they have their own hierarchies to grow into becoming a unit manager, floor manager, and things like that. Vis-a-vis, if you get into a proper organization within the client service, and you can expect to start off with, a 6 to 10 lakh range, I would say, where you are not just picking up a call and answering questions, but you're also having a one-to-one dialogue with customers, understand, delivering a more customized service, right? So that's something that you can look at in the initial phases. And then what happens is, because And you have to make sure that, if you want to really deliver good service, your relationship management skills or building skills should be on point, and you will learn that obviously. But what happens is, in this kind of a job function, the kind of accolades that you can receive from the client, the kind of credentials that you can receive from the client, will determine how fast you grow, right? So if you are having a client who's ready to sort of pitch for you, there are a lot of organizations who look at these credentials received from a client towards a service delivered by one person, that determines their career trajectory. They can get a fast track promotion because they've been really dedicated to their job and made sure that the client problems are resolved, which means they are really cut out for making sure the revenue keeps coming into the company. So, so you have to prove yourselves, and in more creative ways, and that's the whole beauty of this job, right? You get the opportunity to think through, to apply some human skills, to obviously apply your product and concept and process skills, but be creative about the entire thing. Also, how you can pacify the client, saying, yeah, we're working on it, I have your highest interest in mind, and do things. So the career trajectory can be decided not only just by your degrees or by the volumes that you process or the targets that you hit, but by getting a human angle into it, by getting empathy into it, by following the processes to the T as well. So what happens is, now I will talk about a proper structure to your career progression.
I'll
Do you want me to
get
give?
to that, Rashmi.
Okay,
Just give me a second. Let me make the standard announcements that I do to
sure,
just bring people up to date about what we've been discussing so far. So,
absolutely,
you're listening to the My First Job podcast. I'm speaking with Rashmi Birla, and she has this very distinct understanding of customer support, which is calling it client retention, which is a wonderful way to describe why that is not a cost center, but is actually the foundation of what an organization's revenue is. She spoke until now about having graduated in economics, but then finding her way into a client servicing role. And I think she has built a wonderful understanding of what it takes to service customers, not just from looking at customers as, who have problems with the way organizations function, but how sales and support have to work in conjunction. She also spoke about how the multinational organizations have a far better understanding of how this process works, and Indian organizations, as they scale, also understand that this is going to be important for them to survive in future. So if you like this, subscribe, tell your friends, share, and ensure that people who have a way with understanding relationships and are willing to wade into the deep end are really the ones who would benefit from a career like this. Let me get Rashmi back and now speak to her about the structure that she wants to put in place, or the structure that she's already put in place, and tell you how she went about it. All yours,
sure.
Arash.
Thank you so much. I think you very, very, I love the way that you summarize the entire talk until now. And I think it's a good segue into understanding how a support structure should look like, and basically what works for the entire organization. Now, to understand, we could just take client service as being, a bridge between the clients for a company and the internal system or the organization as a whole. And I would like to include sales as well in that organization. So client service is basically at that, acting as that bridge, trying to manage the communication between these two bodies who are actually doing the service delivery versus and the service receiving. So, to start with, and I would like to also, if Venu sir, you agree, to just link it to the career trajectory as well, because
Right.
then it's easier to understand where you can envision being in this sort of a framework, right? So
Sure.
so when there's a let's take a company that is required to set up a complete service function, so to say. And there are different elements to this. One is obviously the team that needs to be there, and we'll talk about some traits of the client service personnel that should be part of the team. Then there is a proper structure in the team in terms of who will do what. Then next comes what is the process that you put in place to ensure that every single request, service request, inquiry, or information requirement that comes in is being tackled. Nothing is slipping through the cracks, and tackled in a way that's you have the accurate information and you're able to disseminate it timely. So, and the process also entails that what are your communication mechanisms with the client, of course, but internal teams as well. So then what are the systems that you need to put in place to be able to ensure a seamless communication and correspondence across this entire ecosystem that we are talking about. So these are the elements that one needs to focus on and put in place so that you can have a proper functioning support framework uh, that helps in the retention function. All right. So to start with, you look at a customer journey after the sales is converted, after the sales is done, and the sales team will pass on this baton to the client support team to take it forward. And then comes in, okay, what do we do first? We know that this is a new client, so then do we have a welcome kit in place? How do you devise that welcome kit that makes the customer aware of really what he should be expecting in the onboarding phase, in the phase where he's using the service actively, and what are his escalation points, where does he have to go to look for information and things like that. And with AI coming into picture, we also want to make sure that a lot of these things are automated first of all, and a
Right.
lot of knowledge repositories are already there. They don't have to really the customer doesn't have to really go to a client service person or a team to resolve their queries. There has to be a portal that comes in picture where and all this information goes in that welcome kit. So then the client is equipped saying, okay, I paid for the service, I know this is my expectation, this is going to happen, I'm going to get a call, there's going to be a training session that's going to be organized, and things like that. So then they have a complete idea of what they've signed up for. Then we move on to basically the first step that we promise the client, saying, okay, this is the team that's going to look after you. So the team, it could be one person, it could be a couple of persons in various geographies if you're looking at a global account that's going to be serviced. And then the team comes together and understands, has an welcome call with the client or the team at the client's end, to then have that first meeting to get to know one another better, understand what their problem points are, what's working well, what's not working well, and things like that, and decide on a way forward. Then the next step is to document the entire thing on a system that you have in place, where dates are there, there are milestones to be completed, there are teams that are going to be assigned, and things like that. So there are various softwares in the market that a company can use to basically make sure that the entire trajectory is very, very chronologically maintained for a client, as well as everything, every activity, be it an email that comes from the client, a phone call that comes, a visit that is made, everything is then over there. And how it helps is, next time when the sales team has to approach them for an upsell or for, say, the renewal, they have that entire engagement summary through the year to be able to understand, okay, we can highlight these points that went really well with the client, and we don't maybe need to delve on the client on the pain points that were happening, or maybe we can assure them that we're going to take care of those pain points. So this whole process is basically something that needs to be set up in place. And in terms of what do you call it, I already spoke about the systems, um, the roles that the customer support team will be playing in this. Now, you can't
Can I
have a
just come in for a moment, Rashmi? What
sure,
I want to
sure.
understand is that, let's say, in terms of your onboarding or various other things, isn't it always harder to get the client to tune in and take them through a process because they think that, we will learn as we go along?
Yeah,
how
you're right.
hard or how easy is it to get them to break that up into a process that captures their attention, because sometimes all of that would be captured in onboarding, but they'll say, huh, we'll do this, we know this. But when they
Yeah,
face the problem, they'll come back to you on precisely what you were trying to warn them about.
yeah. No,
So
that's a great
how do
point.
you
Yes.
how do you
So
get over that thing? How do you break it up?
So, you get a sense of this when in the initial, in initial phase, when you are trying to build that connect with them and show them really how to go about things, and you get that, okay, we'll look into it, or we will come back to you on this, and so we get a sense of, okay, this is what it's it like you have a persona of customers that you're going to go to. The
Right,
client service team has personas of clients that they're going to be approaching. So then there's a bucket. So
right,
this client is someone who does not really need that kind of hand holding initially, because they are assuming that they would be able to really do it themselves. Now, to an extent, sometimes they are right that, okay, they can, and it's a good thing for the client support team, because then they can focus on other clients and
right.
leave these clients on their own. But sometimes it so happens that the clients assume that they will be able to, but then they're not. So what we do is, when we insist on a welcome call, because we want to know what your uh, for lack of a better word, what your attitude is towards
Right.
the service and overall, like, the clients were very embedded, or say very, they have a high attitude because of the brand that they're working with. So we need to
Mm.
gauge that, because then our service will be tailored to appeasing them, or to an extent matching that kind of an attitude that they want to see. Because I always told my team, if the client has an attitude, you're working for a brand that also has an attitude. You can't just give in all the time because you're the support staff. You have to stand up with that brand attitude and say, this is what we can do, this is not what this is we cannot do, and they respect it. It's a human thing, right? So to have that welcome call is very important, to first understand what persona this client is about, and then obviously the essentials like their team structure, who's going to use the service, what is the frequency, what are the extra services, etc. So to answer your question, what we do is we gauge the persona of the client, and then we also have pointers where we will tell them that, given our past experience servicing other clients, we have seen that they struggle with this and this. So we would want to just help you with these, and rest, I think, we're very confident that you will love the way you're doing things on your own.
You were speaking about the roles that you would assign, which is where I cut in. So
Yes.
you can,
No, no
what
worries.
are the
Yeah,
various
sure.
ways in which you assign roles? Yes.
Mhm. Yes. So that two objectives for assigning these roles to be kept in mind. One is that every role has a different level of finesse and expertise that will be required. You cannot have a one shoe fits all, one size fits all approach, because you will be dealing with different levels of customers also. Not all customers are going to pay you $400,000 a month or something like that. So first is um, that making sure that the level of expertise that you hire is going to be varied across the kind of customers that you're facing off with. And second, also keeping in mind that there has to be a defined career trajectory or a progression that the service team needs to see for themselves, because then otherwise it'll
Right.
be very easy for them to get bored, and they see no growth prospects, they will leave, and that's a huge cost again to the firm, right? So keeping that in mind, we there are a couple of approaches. One of them that sort of works is, like I said, we bucketize clients into different revenues amounts, right? So you have for example, you have a tier one, so to say, the simplest one, which is paying you the highest, and then tier 2, tier 3, the revenue bands. Basically you make those tiers, and then you say the lowest paying customers, this is the level of service that they should expect. I mean, they will expect a tier 1 support, but you also have to be part of the organization and justify the revenue that they're giving to you. So this is the support requirement for this lowest band of clients. So for this, we will have a team of a service desk, so to say, a common service desk, which will be manned by the beginners, or say who are just getting into customer support and things like that, a level of experience of say 0 to 3 years, for example. And they will be the ones, and there will be very generic support, very very customer support functions basically become the
Right.
replying to emails and again. Then the second tier clients or the next level band will require a little more finesse, a little more hand holding or support. So then these will be supported by not a desk, but a smaller team of people, like 3 people, 4 people, taking care of 10 accounts, for example. So
Okay.
then, you narrow down the service delivery parameters for them. There will be more monitoring of these KPIs for them. For example, what was the average cycle time? What is the number of days that you took, or the aging of the query that came from client? And so these KPIs will be monitored for this team to understand that service delivery is going on as should be or as expected. Moving to the next tier again, the number of people servicing the one client will reduce. The client will have a visibility on, okay, this is my escalation desk, like this is the team that I need to go to. Maybe sometimes they can have a common email ID of the desk saying, for example, it's a client called ABC, the client. So then there'll be a support ABC at the, it'll be an email ID dedicated to that client, and they'll be able to support it. So the level of dedicated support to that client would be something that goes on a third tier. Now, so on and so forth. The highest tier client will get like a proper support guy. If he is based geographically outside, they will also have a support guy in that geographical location who will go and meet the client, who will ensure that they are also included in our pilot rollouts. For example, if you're rolling out new products, and they will get preference on it, we will get them to participate in our talk shows. There are different perks that you can really design and make
Right.
sure that
Right.
your tiers are serviced, and the client also feels that because they're paying more, they're getting that level of service, they're getting that level of importance and prominence in our with their service provider. So that's how you
So
grow.
when
Yeah.
it comes, yeah, yeah, no, this is a great way to figure out how exactly you can deliver. Now, the question is that there are these levels of service which have been defined. But what happens when you come across situations where the service level for that particular case has not been defined, which could arise from some incident or uh,
Yeah.
some outcome that a client has had? So, if you can take us through a couple of real life examples of something that was not part of a regular script and you had to scramble or figure things out. Because I think you need to give people a sense of what they are actually wrestling with. Because standard answers, you can
Mm.
probably manage it because they know, okay, for Tata Sky, your particular thing is not working. Okay, have you tried this, and this?
Yes.
But let's say I paid for this particular channel. I'm saying it could be a series of things. So in your case, or doesn't it, such instances are rare. I want to understand what happens.
So what happens is, first there has to be a proper, very very defined process for highlighting these immediately when they we call them exceptions, right?
Okay.
So yes, one there is a standard process for doing everything, and then there are exceptions, and there are exception handling protocols that are defined based on every experience. Like you said, these keep coming, and then every experience leads us to a learning, and then we will put them in the exception handling protocol guide. So one essential part of the training for the team when they are onboarded, the service team, is to understand first what defines as standard and what could be exceptions. Anything that is deviant from the standard could be an exception. So first, what is the process for highlighting? To whom do you highlight when you face an exception? It could be an exceptional request, it could be something to do with it could lead sometimes to some breaches with the contract. Like there could be various scenarios when we speak about exceptions. So first, highlight it timely. That's the most important thing that I have learned, that you got to be really cognizant if you've done an error as well, and that's an exception as well. Like you have sent one report below that should have been sent to one client to another client. That's a huge breach of confidentiality, and that's a so r- you know being cognizant that there can be mistakes that occur, but report them on time. I am harping on that so much because I've had that experience where things don't get highlighted timely. The client brings it to us, and then it becomes another story altogether, because then
Very
we're in the
hard for
defense.
people.
Yes. Anyway,
Yes.
so to have that protocol, once it's highlighted, then the senior team on the client support front will discuss internally in terms of how feasible is this request for us to be able to support it. For example, the client is paying this amount, but as an exception, or say because they are getting into a regulatory compliance check, uh, they need these reports from us urgently. So there are two aspects. First, they need the reports that they are not signed up for. Second, it's an urgent request. So for us as a team to then deliberate, okay, so how strategically places this client in our framework, like how much will it cost for us to be able to service this, how much manpower will it require, is it actually feasible to do it in that time frame. So these parameters will have to be looked at, and more often than not, I can tell you that we will want to oblige the client, we will want to service them, so that it leaves them with a good experience. And then it gives us the bandwidth to say that, okay, look, we did this for you, we have this product, it
And
would
it's
be
always
helpful and
a,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah. So use it to your advantage is what I would say, is the way to look at it strategically. And we also get the sales involved immediately, because then they've also had some dialogues with the client, they have a lot of background, so it always helps to get that intel into place also, and then make those decisions of how to service these exceptions. I hope I answered
great.
your question.
Totally. And I think
Yeah.
that's what I'm really enjoying with this, about this conversation with Rashmi, because she's detailed out exactly what it takes to set up a team. How do you define their roles in the first place based on what the client requires? And then ensure that each one of those roles is very sharply defined to ensure that the client benefits from this. Because the whole idea of setting up a customer support system is to ensure that the client's needs are met and the organization benefits from it. Now, in the final stretch of this particular podcast, what I'm going to speak to Rashmi about is to figure out how do you ensure that sales and customer support are in constant touch, because a whole lot of how the organization is doing and what its base of revenue is comes from customer support. Because if you retain a client, you're retaining revenue. So growth is one aspect, but retention is just as important. And I'd like to hear from Rashmi on what she is doing to ensure that the retention aspect becomes just as important in the annual projections with the client, with the company, and how she gets her team to keep this in mind. Have I made myself clear on this?
Absolutely. And it's a
Okay.
very, very integral part of the entire setup to be able to have this constant line of communication between the sales team and the support team. And I don't think I mentioned this, but when we have those onboarding calls in the beginning, when the client has just signed up, and the welcome call, we insist that the sales team be part, the salesperson or the sales team be part of these calls, because there's a lot of dialogue, or there's a lot of correspondence that would have gone on between the client and the sales team that we're not aware of. So having the sales team be on those calls, be present, just helps to do a lot of expectation setting, right? Because they are the ones who are actually in know of what all happened. So they are involved in the process from earlier on, and they're always, and from what I have seen, the sales team is also very keen on being involved in the entire journey that the client is going through. And that's why one is to for these structures that I spoke about, like for the tier 1 clients or the highest paying clients, and maybe till the third band, there is a process where there's a monthly call between the sales team for that region and the support team for that region, because then they discuss really, the sales team gives them a download of the and I'm talking in the global context. It can be applied to a local or a, an India level framework as well, where the sales team can give them a download of really what is the current theme that the clients are really after, what are the gaps that they are seeing, or what are the market trends that we should be aware of as a service team, so that when we are servicing the clients we keep those in mind. Then there's an interaction between, okay, so this we discuss one client in detail, for example, and then there is a consensus of what are the next steps, because it could be an upsell, because a lot of times the client service team is also they have a responsibility to identify red flags obviously, but also opportunities for upsell. So if a client has come back saying, okay, okay, you gave me all this, but I'm also requiring data for, the underlying data for this. Now we know that underlying data is another product that the client might be interested in now, so immediately getting the sales into the loop, ceasing them or getting into call, whatever, just letting them know that this is what the client is requiring. So then immediately the sales team is alert that there is a burning requirement. For example, it's a very live requirement, it's not like we're going later on. So once that is there, the sales team comes into action, and then maybe there's an upsell, right? So we and I'm saying we because I'm right now representing client retention side. So that's why the entire partnership between a sales team and a service team is absolutely critical. And one way of doing it is through the systems that I spoke about, right? So a common platform, like you have Salesforce, for example, is a customer relationship management software. Now everything that the comes in from the client, comes in from the internal teams, comes in from the sales or support, all contracts are there. E- all bits of information about that relationship as a whole is part of that page. Now it is up to the sales team and the support team to make sure that information is updated, because all of us agree that a lot of times things change, people move, teams change, but that information needs to be there at a place where nobody's changing it and it remains there. It does not be human dependent. If I'm going out, then if somebody comes in my place, they should get the same intel in the same manner and act on it. So that's how I would say that this interaction leads to more generation of revenue by cross selling, retention, of course, and escalation management. Because the client can come and say that, look, you told me this, you said you will be able to give this report on such and such date every month, but I'm not getting it. And then we find out that the sales actually promised it without really asking the support team
Checking
if
that.
we'll be able to deliver it. So if that communication is always there, we don't lead ourselves to these misunderstandings and then a unfavorable client experience.
So we'll delve into two more things, Rashmi, before we wind up for today. One is that you've spent a substantial amount of time building up the entire ESG practice or customer
Yeah.
retention on ESG, and that is a growing field. So if you could tell us what was involved in setting it up specifically for ESG, and then which is common to, of course there will be something which is very specific, but there are also other things that people can learn from how
Yes.
this entire uh, infrastructure was set up.
Sure. And I'm very happy and proud to talk about this, because this was, I think, one of the most challenging part of my career. And the reason why I decided to move over to, the company that I worked in ESG for was because I was tasked with this whole mammoth task of just setting up the team. And when I say set up the team, it means the process, the systems, the team, obviously, and things like that. So and also the fact that ESG 12 years back was something was almost non-existent compared
Right.
to how popular it is today. Nobody knew ESG. Even I did not know ESG, and I had to study a lot to go through that interview process. But so we had a handful number of clients, like around 200 to 400 clients globally. But the tricky part was our sales team was going and selling the concept and the processes. the client had very limited understanding of, okay, we're buying this because we think this is necessary, but we rely on you to be able to help us through the entire journey of using this and applying this. And we, as customer support, were supposed to obviously have systems in place to be able to service them, but also the intel and the knowledge to be able to show ourselves as experts in this field, where there's very limited knowledge available in the on the internet as well. And all that we could rely was, I mean, I used to tell my team, we'll rely on each other, we'll rely on the client giving us intel, and then we'll process it and things like that. So that was, the process was not the challenge. The fact that both the client and the service provider were equally new to this whole arena of ESG and sustainability, and then to show yourself as a notch higher, and what can you put in place to make sure that you show yourself in that light and not hamper the experience, right? So that is something that we put knowledge management systems into place. We called in a lot of the team. One of the KPIs of the team was to build knowledge articles. So they had a target to, every time they interacted with a client, every time they had some phone call with a client, anything that comes out as a learning. It could be something as simple as, you know um, we did not know that tire stocks, just an example, but companies who manufacture tires are actually restricted for investment in the US. I'm just giving a hypothetical example. We did not know this.
Right.
So this was part of our knowledge portal or knowledge repository that we were building. uh, that was a challenge. And then finding personnel, finding support teams or people who actually knew about ESG was another equally huge task, because there was no courses like there are today about ESG. So then I think what I resorted to was the basic element. What is the expectation from this job? It's basically someone who is able to manage client expectations and deliver kick-ass customer support, or service delivery has to be timely and accurate. So we just focused on building a team that had some, the senior members obviously should have had some experience of client support. They understand the essence of what it means to deliver quality support to a client, and how, why is it so important, why our process is so important. So we needed some people who had extensive support in doing these similar roles in previous organizations. Those would be the senior members. For the junior members or the entry level members that we were targeting, we were just going on certain, what I call as a spark that you can see in a in an individual, where you talk about, okay, how have, just to get some inputs on what that individual has gone through in their life experience, to understand how they have tackled certain situations in their personal life and professional life. It gives you a hint of, okay, this person will be able to face off with a client in a situation of crisis, and be very level headed and calmly deliver to the client that, look, yes, we messed up, this is what we're doing to make things better and whatever, and things like that. Or also sometimes create the kind of what we call as some hypothetically mesmerizing perceptions for the client, saying, we can do this, or glamorize things for the client, where we know that we have limited capabilities, but we'll somehow deliver. Or how do you just
Okay.
yeah, manipulate the client to an extent, if I can say so. We wanted such street smart people to be part of the team, and I'm very proud to say that, yes, we were able to assemble a team of that stature and that composition, so to say. And obviously we needed some tech heavy people to understand the process, the systems, and set up those processes for us. So yeah, I think that
So,
was one
roughly,
of the
how
challenges
large
for us.
was this team that you finally built, Rashmi?
We started with a 12-member team, a dedicated support desk in Mumbai, in India, and then slowly branched out, because, as I said, we started off with a client base of around 250 globally. And in around 4 or 5 years, the client base in Europe only had grown to around 600. So that's the kind of
Wow.
exponential growth that we saw. And then after COVID it just went another level. But then so we branched out into the EMEA region, which is the European and Middle East region, the Americas, and the APAC region. So then we had offices in Monterey, in Manila, in Mumbai, and then for the APAC. And then for Europe, we were supporting them out of Mumbai because of the favorable time zone that
Time.
we are in.
Yeah.
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 So then that grew obviously, and then we had dedicated support leads over there. Then and then they started replicating the same processes, because it's very important if there are teams that are remotely located, but we function as one unit. Because tomorrow, if I have a client that's a global client, then the Americas, when they shut shop, they have to transfer that client query, or say an escalated query, to the APAC team. If the processes are not standardized, then the client will receive different messaging. He will not be able to understand what he heard from the Americas team versus an APAC team. It'll be very confusing. So the next challenge is, when you set up teams, the process across teams has to be so standardized. And that only happens when you have proper CRM systems in place, so that everything is automated, everything is online, and all records are there. One thing that everybody says in client services: if it's not on the system, it never happened.
So
And
you
we swear
started out
by it.
with 12 people. How much did it grow into the service team?
I would say we grow to at least 60, 65 of us across the world, like across globally. And then I was heading the European team, basically.
So this is amazing because if it's 60 people for 600 clients, it also means that these people are crucial too. It's almost as if the organization's retention depended on these 60
Very
people
heavily.
delivering on the job,
Yes. No,
which
actually,
I
for
think,
1,400 clients. Sorry. By the time I left, it was 1,400 clients, but 60,
wow,
65 service people.
wow.
Yes.
That's phenomenal efficiency, Rashmi, because
And
I
that's
think
because
it
there are
it
systems in
shows
place.
you,
Yeah.
how much you're. It also says that once you get the right processes in place, then it's not the number of people you require in service, but to be able to anticipate exactly what the client is looking for is a very important part of the understanding.
Yes.
So, in conclusion, uh, what would you say is important for people who are getting into customer retention? Because I'd prefer to say that rather than just say customer support.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I think we should use this to, popularize the term, make it more viral, and make it more appealing for people to actually
Yeah,
consider these roles. Okay. And I would say that if you like excitement in your job, for example, and be accoladed for, you know, using a lot of creativity and autonomous decision making at the spur of the moment, to be able to decide, okay, I need to deliver this to the client, get in touch with my internal team, I need this, you need to give me this, so you have that bridge built and then deliver. So there's a lot of excitement. If you're looking for a lot of excitement, not a mundane job of getting into an office and filling up excel sheets, and not to say it's bad, but everybody has their
yeah, that's
preferences.
whatever
Yeah,
gets you going.
whatever
Yeah,
floats your boat.
exactly.
Yeah. So a lot of
Yeah,
excitement if you like every day to be different, if you want to travel. Okay, because that's a huge component that people don't realize, that you get to travel a lot to client locations and be with them. And I, in my first job, I would just travel to a lot of clients within Mumbai also, and just go there for a cup of coffee. But that interaction, that human interaction, really
makes a big
gives you that
difference.
sense of yes, I like what I'm doing, right? Traveling to another location, coming back in the evening, gives you a high. Let's accept it. So if you're looking for something that helps you stay connected to the world, be the front end, because there are jobs which are front ending and back ends. Okay, and both have their own merits. But if you're a person who's a very dynamic person, who would like that window open from your organization to be able to look out and interact with the external world, and not sit behind the desk and just do the operation side of it, then you should do retention. There is a career trajectory to it. You then move into sales, logically, if you've mastered the product, the processes, and the client relationships, move into sales, and then everybody knows that sales is the cream of the job organization anyway. So I don't need to speak more about that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Rashmi, but we have to leave it there. Thank you
Absolutely.
very much. I think it was extremely interesting and appealing.
I love